Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiant, watching the stars through the main view screen. His ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 weeks now, conducting routine surveys of empty star systems near the edge of known human territory. The mission was simple enough to map new worlds and look for anything useful that Earth might need in the future. Jake had been captain of the Defiant for 5 years, and this was just another ordinary assignment. His crew was small but skilled, with only 40 people aboard the exploration vessel. Lisa Zhang sat at the navigation station checking their current position, while Danny Rodriguez monitored the engines from his post. Amy Carter worked quietly at the communications console, listening for any signals from nearby space. The Defiant was not a warship, but rather a scientific vessel designed for long-range exploration. It carried basic defensive weapons and shields, but nothing that could match a real military ship. Jake preferred it that way since his job was to explore and discover, not to fight battles in the darkness between stars. Everything changed when Amy Carter detected an unknown energy signature approaching their position. The signal was unlike anything in human databases, and it was moving fast toward their location. Jake ordered battle stations as a precaution, while Lisa tried to plot the incoming object's trajectory. Within minutes, a massive alien vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of the Defiant. The ship was enormous compared to the human explorer, and its design was completely foreign, with smooth blue surfaces and crystalline structures jutting out from the hull. Strange lights pulsed along its length in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Amy received an incoming transmission, but the language was completely unknown. The universal translator tried to make sense of the alien words, but could only manage fragments. Jake heard references to primitive species and specimen collection, which made his blood run cold. These aliens were not interested in peaceful first contact. The alien ship, which Jake later learned belonged to the Zephyrian Empire, moved closer to the Defiant without any apparent concern for human response. Through the view screen, Jake could see smaller craft launching from the massive vessel heading directly toward his ship. The aliens clearly intended to board the Defiant, whether the humans agreed or not. Jake had seconds to make a decision that would change everything. He could surrender and hope the aliens would be merciful, or he could fight back against impossible odds. The choice was easy for a man who had spent his entire career refusing to back down from challenges. He ordered Lisa to take evasive action, while Danny pushed the engines to maximum power. The Defiant was fast for an exploration ship, but the alien boarding craft were faster and soon caught up despite the crew's best efforts. Amy tried to send a distress signal back to Earth, but the alien ship was jamming all communications. The first alien boarding pod attached itself to the Defiant's hull with a metallic clang that echoed through the ship. Jake grabbed a plasma rifle from the emergency weapons locker and headed toward the breach point with half his crew. The other half stayed at their stations, trying to keep the ship operational. Under these impossible circumstances, the aliens who came through the breach were tall, blue-skinned beings with what looked like crystalline armor growing directly from their bodies. They moved with confident arrogance, expecting the primitive humans to surrender immediately upon seeing their superior technology and physical capabilities. What they found instead was Captain Jake Morrison and 20 human crew members who had no intention of surrendering their ship or their freedom to anyone. The first alien through the breach fell to Jake's plasma rifle before it could even raise its own weapon. The second alien managed to fire a shot that missed Jake by inches before Danny Rodriguez tackled it to the ground. The battle for the Defiant began in the narrow corridors near the breach point, but quickly spread throughout the ship. The aliens had better weapons and armor, but the humans knew every inch of their vessel and used that knowledge to their advantage. Lisa Zhang led a team through the maintenance tunnels to attack the aliens from behind, while Amy Carter used the ship's internal systems to confuse and disorient the invaders. For 72 hours, the battle raged through every deck and compartment of the exploration vessel. The aliens had expected quick victory against what they assumed was a weak, primitive species, but instead found themselves fighting desperate humans who refused to give up no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. Jake Morrison proved to be a natural tactical commander during the crisis. He organized his crew into small teams that struck hard and fast before disappearing into the ship's hidden passages. When the aliens tried to take the bridge, Jake was waiting with improvised explosives that Danny had cobbled together from engineering supplies. The humans used every trick they could think of to level the playing field against their technologically superior enemies. They flooded certain sections with toxic gases that affected alien breathing, while wearing emergency masks themselves. They cut power to areas where aliens were advancing, forcing them to fight in complete darkness where human knowledge of the ship layout gave them an advantage. By the end of the second day, the aliens were growing frustrated and desperate. They had lost more than half their boarding party to human resistance and still controlled only a few sections of the ship. Their commander, a tall Zephyrian with elaborate crystal formations on his armor, began to realize that these humans were not like any species they had encountered before. The turning point came when Amy Carter managed to restore communications and called for help from the alien ship itself. She had learned enough of their language during the battle to send a message claiming that Jake Morrison was willing to surrender if the aliens would guarantee safe treatment for his crew. When the alien commander came aboard personally to accept the surrender, Jake was waiting with a captured alien weapon and 3 of his best crew members. Instead of surrendering, the humans captured the alien commander and several of his officers, using them as hostages to negotiate safe passage away from the area. The Zephyrian ship was forced to let the Defiant escape rather than risk the life of their commander. Jake Morrison had done the impossible by not only surviving first contact with a hostile alien species, but actually defeating them in combat and escaping with valuable intelligence about their capabilities and intentions. The news of the Defiant's victory sent shockwaves through both human space and the wider galaxy. Jake Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he knew that this was only the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous than anyone could imagine. 6 months after Captain Jake Morrison's victory aboard the Defiant, the news had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the Grand Assembly Hall of Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session that would determine the fate of billions of beings throughout known space. The massive chamber held representatives from 12 different alien species who had maintained galactic peace for over 1,000 years through careful diplomacy and overwhelming military superiority. Speaker Veltar of the Crystalline Nexari stood at the central podium, addressing the assembled delegates with growing concern in his translated voice. The defeat of a Zephyrian boarding party by primitive humans had shattered assumptions that the Council had held for centuries about how first contact with new species should proceed. Never before had a newly discovered civilization not only resisted Council authority but actually defeated their forces in direct combat. War strategist Kothron of the reptilian Sorvak species paced behind his delegation's seating area with barely contained anger. His people were the military backbone of the Council, and the humiliation of their Zephyrian allies demanded swift response. The tall reptilian being had fought in dozens of campaigns to bring order to chaotic systems, and he viewed humanity as just another problem that could be solved with proper application of force. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan had been working around the clock to prepare humanity for what everyone knew was coming. The newly formed Interstellar Defense Command operated from a massive complex beneath the surface of Luna, where Earth's best military minds planned for a war that seemed inevitable. Kate had been promoted from captain to admiral, specifically because of her experience with alien technology, captured from the Defiant incident. Strategic analyst Peter Knox sat across from Admiral Sullivan, reviewing intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of humanity's situation. The aliens had been observing Earth for months using stealth technology that human sensors could barely detect. Every military installation, every shipyard, and every defensive position had been mapped and cataloged by enemy scouts who moved through human space like ghosts. Dr. Helen Wright, the Eye, military's chief xenobiologist, had spent countless hours studying the captured Zephyrian technology and biological samples that Jake Morrison had brought back from his encounter. Her research revealed that the aliens possessed technology that was centuries ahead of human capabilities in most areas, but she had also discovered some surprising weaknesses that might be exploited in future conflicts. Colonel Ryan Hayes served as the military liaison between the Defense Command and Earth's various national governments. His job was to coordinate the massive military buildup that had begun immediately after first contact while trying to maintain some semblance of normal civilian life on Earth. The task was becoming increasingly difficult as more reports of alien activity reached military intelligence. The First sign that the situation was escalating came when human scout ships began encountering alien vessels at the very edge of their patrol routes. Lieutenant Ben Foster was commanding a routine reconnaissance mission when his sensors detected multiple alien signatures moving in formation toward human space. When he tried to investigate further the alien, ships opened fire with warning shots that barely missed his small vessel. Captain Maria Santos had a similar encounter 2 weeks later when her exploration ship was challenged by an alien patrol that demanded she turn back immediately. When Maria refused to abandon her mission, the aliens disabled her engines with some kind of energy weapon and boarded her ship. Unlike Jake Morrison's crew, Maria had no choice but to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The aliens who captured Maria's ship were not Zephyrians but members of a different species that called themselves the Vorthak. These beings were smaller than humans with gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They questioned Maria extensively about human military capabilities and the location of Earth before releasing her with a warning that humanity must cease all expansion beyond their home system. Tony Mills was the communications officer aboard the cargo vessel New Horizons when everything changed forever. His ship was carrying 847 colonists to establish humanity's first permanent settlement beyond the solar system. The colonists included entire families with children who had volunteered to start new lives on a distant world that surveys had shown to be perfect for human habitation. The attack came without warning as the New Horizons approached the target system. A massive Zephyrian battlecruiser dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of the civilian vessel and immediately opened fire with weapons that could destroy a city. Tony managed to send a brief distress signal before the ship's communications array was destroyed in the first volley of enemy fire. Captain Dale Peterson tried desperately to save his ship and passengers, but the New Horizons was a civilian transport with no weapons and minimal defensive systems. The alien weapons tore through the ship's hull like it was made of paper, while families huddled in terror as their new home became their tomb. Within minutes, the entire vessel was reduced to floating debris with no survivors. The distress signal from the New Horizons reached Earth 3 days later, and the news hit human civilization like a nuclear explosion. Admiral Sullivan was in a meeting with President Claire Johnson when Amy Carter, now promoted to commander, brought them the decoded message that Tony Mills had died trying to send. The recording was brief, but clear in its implications that humanity was now at war whether they wanted to be or not. President Johnson had been hoping that diplomacy might still be possible, but the murder of nearly 1,000 innocent civilians, including children, changed everything. She convened the United Earth War Council within hours of receiving the news, and the decision was unanimous. Humanity would not bow to alien demands and would fight to defend their right to exist as a free species in the galaxy. General Frank Weber began mobilizing every military unit on Earth and its colonies, while Defense Secretary Linda Gray coordinated with industrial leaders to convert civilian manufacturing to military production. Director Paul Morgan of Earth Intelligence started recruiting agents for deep space reconnaissance missions that would gather vital information about alien capabilities and intentions. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, believed that their demonstration of superior firepower would force immediate human surrender. Speaker Veltar sent an official ultimatum to Earth, demanding complete submission to Council authority in exchange for continued existence as a protected species under alien oversight. The Council was confident that no primitive civilization would be foolish enough to challenge their combined might. What they did not understand was that humanity had never learned how to surrender and had no intention of starting now. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an entire species decided that death was preferable to slavery. The Galactic Council sent their final ultimatum to Earth through Commander Steve Parker, a human pilot who had been captured during a border skirmish 3 weeks earlier. Steve had been tortured and broken by his alien captors, but he managed to deliver the Council's message with enough defiance in his voice to show that his spirit remained unbroken, despite everything they had done to him. Speaker Veltar appeared on the transmission, standing behind Steve with 2 Zephyrian guards flanking the captured human. The alien leader spoke in perfect English that had been programmed into the translation systems after months of studying human communications. His words were clear and final as he delivered what the Council believed would be humanity's last chance to avoid complete destruction. The ultimatum demanded that humanity immediately cease all expansion beyond their solar system and submit completely to Galactic Council authority. In exchange, the Council offered what they considered generous terms that would allow humans to continue existing as a protected species under alien oversight. They would be given technology and resources in return for absolute obedience to Council laws and regulations. President Claire Johnson received the message in the secure briefing room beneath the Capitol, where she had been meeting with the United Earth War Council. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat to her right while General Frank Weber occupied the chair to her left. Defense Secretary Linda Gray and Intelligence Director Paul Morgan completed the circle of advisors who would decide humanity's response to the alien demands. The discussion was brief because there was really nothing to discuss. Every person in that room had grown up learning about humanity's long history of resistance to tyranny and oppression. They had studied the great leaders who chose death over surrender, and the ordinary people who fought impossible odds rather than accept slavery. The decision was unanimous before anyone even spoke a word. President Johnson's response became famous throughout human space and was broadcast on every communication channel that could reach the stars. She looked directly into the camera with steel in her voice as she delivered humanity's answer to the Galactic Council's ultimatum. Her words were simple and direct, with no room for misinterpretation about where humanity stood. She told the aliens that humanity had never bowed to tyrants among their own species and would not start with creatures from other worlds. She reminded them that humans had fought wars against impossible odds throughout their history and had always found ways to win through determination and ingenuity. She promised that if the Council wanted war, then humanity would give them more war than they could handle. The transmission ended with President Johnson stating that any alien ship found in human space would be destroyed without warning, and any alien world that supported attacks on human civilians would face retaliation. The message was sent to every corner of the galaxy through captured alien communication systems that human engineers had learned to operate during the months since first contact. War strategist Kothron received the human response while meeting with the Council's military commanders aboard the massive battle station that served as their mobile command center. The reptilian general had expected immediate surrender from the primitive humans, and their defiant response filled him with rage that his own species had not felt for centuries. He convinced the assembled leaders that only immediate overwhelming force would bring the humans to their senses. The Council authorized the largest military operation in their history, called the Pacification Fleet, which consisted of 200 warships representing the combined might of 4 different alien species. The fleet included Zephyrian battlecruisers with their crystal-powered weapons, Sarvak heavy destroyers armed with plasma cannons, Vorthak stealth ships equipped with cloaking devices, and Nexari support vessels that could repair damage in the middle of battle. Admiral Kate Sullivan knew the alien fleet was coming long before it reached human space, thanks to intelligence gathered by deep space reconnaissance missions led by agents like Captain Marcus Bell and Lieutenant Sarah Davis. The humans had only 60 ships to defend their home system, but Kate had spent months developing tactics that might give them a chance against superior numbers and technology. The Battle of Luna began when the alien Pacification Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, expecting to find a small defensive force that would quickly surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. Instead, they encountered Admiral Sullivan's carefully prepared battle formation that had been designed specifically to exploit weaknesses that Dr. Helen Wright had discovered in alien ship designs. Captain Alex Chen commanded the destroyer squadron that initiated the human attack, with a coordinated strike against the largest alien vessels. His ships used a tactic that no alien commander had ever seen before, as they flew directly toward enemy battleships with no apparent regard for their own survival. The aliens expected the human ships to turn away at the last moment, but instead they rammed into alien hulls at full speed while detonating their nuclear warheads. The kamikaze attacks destroyed 6 alien capital ships in the first 10 minutes of battle, while only costing humanity 4 destroyers. The psychological impact on the alien fleet was immediate and devastating, as commanders who had never faced an enemy willing to trade ships for tactical advantage found themselves completely unprepared for human tactics. Commander Jennifer Blake, led the fighter wings in coordinated swarm attacks that overwhelmed alien point defense systems through sheer numbers and unpredictable flight patterns. Her pilots flew their small craft into the massive alien ships like angry insects attacking giants, while using hit-and-run tactics that prevented the aliens from targeting them effectively. The human fleet employed psychological warfare that was completely foreign to galactic military doctrine by broadcasting recordings of the New Horizons' destruction to every alien ship on open communication channels. The recordings included the final messages from parents trying to save their children and the screams of innocents dying in the cold vacuum of space. The humans wanted their enemies to understand exactly what kind of war they had started. General Weber had prepared the Luna defenses with hidden weapons platforms that emerged from asteroid hiding places when the alien fleet moved closer to Earth. These platforms used captured alien technology that had been reverse-engineered and improved by human scientists who understood that their survival depended on turning enemy weapons against their creators. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with 60% of the alien pacification fleet destroyed or disabled, while humanity lost 40% of their defending ships. By any military standard, the humans had won a decisive victory against impossible odds, but the cost had been enormous, with thousands of human lives lost in the defense of their homeworld. The surviving alien ships retreated in complete disorder, while their commanders tried to understand how a primitive species had defeated the most powerful military force in galactic history. The Galactic Council was forced to acknowledge that they had gravely underestimated their human opponents, and that this war would not end quickly or easily as they had planned. Following their stunning victory at Luna, Admiral Kate Sullivan knew that humanity could not afford to wait for the aliens to reorganize and attack again. She launched Operation Retribution within days of the battle, while the enemy was still reeling from their unexpected defeat. The plan was simple but dangerous, as human forces would take the war directly to alien territory before they could recover from their losses. Captain Jerry Walsh commanded the first strike force that jumped into alien space using experimental faster-than-light technology that Dr. Robert Chen and his research team had developed by combining human engineering with captured alien components. The new drive systems allowed human ships to appear without warning in enemy systems where no defensive preparations had been made. The ghost strikes began hitting alien supply bases and communication hubs throughout the outer regions of Council space. Captain Rachel Wells specialized in siege warfare and led attacks against heavily fortified alien outposts that had stood unconquered for hundreds of years. Her forces used human mining equipment converted into siege weapons to crack open alien bunkers that were supposedly impregnable. Nina Foster became a legend throughout both human and alien space as the leader of a specialized unit known as the Reapers. Her team had perfected the art of capturing alien vessels intact by using boarding tactics that turned the aliens' own arrogance against them. Technical specialist Mike Torres could reverse engineer any alien technology within hours, while boarding specialist Amanda Clark led assault teams that cleared enemy ships with ruthless efficiency. The psychological impact of human raids on the Galactic Council was far greater than the actual military damage being inflicted. For the first time in their recorded history, Council species began evacuating border worlds as human task forces pushed deeper into territory that had been considered completely safe for over 1,000 years. The Nexari crystalline cities dimmed their lights in mourning, while Saurvac reptilian warriors spoke in hushed tones about the relentless ones who showed no mercy to their enemies. What terrified the aliens most was humanity's complete disregard for the established rules of galactic warfare. Human commanders like Colonel Sarah Bennett and Major Kevin Turner liberated alien prison worlds where the Council had kept rebellious species locked away for centuries. Instead of simply conquering these worlds, the humans armed the prisoners and helped them establish their own governments based on freedom rather than submission to alien authority. The liberation campaigns revealed the true nature of the Galactic Council as human forces, discovered evidence of systematic oppression that had been hidden from galactic view for generations. Entire species had been enslaved or exterminated for refusing to submit to Council rule, while others had been relocated to barren worlds where they struggled to survive under alien oversight. Captain Lisa Zhang now commanded her own ship after being promoted for her service aboard the Defiant during first contact. Her vessel specialized in reconnaissance missions that gathered intelligence about alien military installations and civilian populations. The information she collected helped human commanders distinguish between legitimate military targets and innocent civilians who were themselves victims of Council oppression. Danny Rodriguez had become one of humanity's leading experts on alien technology after his experience fighting aboard the Defiant. His engineering teams worked around the clock to adapt captured alien weapons and defensive systems for use on human ships. The rapid technological advancement gave humanity advantages that the aliens never expected a primitive species to possess. Amy Carter coordinated communications between scattered human forces operating deep in enemy territory where traditional radio signals could not reach. Her network of relay stations and messenger ships kept Admiral Sullivan informed about the progress of raids and liberation efforts while providing early warning about alien counterattacks that might threaten human operations. The aliens attempted several counteroffensives designed to stop human expansion but found themselves facing enemies who fought like no other species in galactic history. Human commanders used tactics that seemed insane to alien military leaders, including deliberate sacrifice of entire units to achieve strategic objectives and coordinated attacks that appeared to have no logical purpose until they suddenly converged on vital enemy positions. War strategist Cawthron tried desperately to adapt Council military doctrine to counter human tactics, but every strategy he developed was quickly countered by human innovation. The reptilian general had studied warfare for centuries but found himself completely outmatched by human commanders who seemed to think of new ways to fight with every battle they encountered. The breakthrough came when Captain Nina Foster's Reapers captured an intact Council command ship during a raid on the Zerian system. Mike Torres discovered that the vessel contained complete tactical databases showing the locations of every major alien military installation within 50 light-years of human space. The intelligence treasure trove gave Admiral Sullivan everything she needed to plan the ultimate strike against the heart of Council. Power Speaker Veltar received increasingly desperate reports from military commanders who could not understand how their technologically superior forces continued to lose battles against primitive human ships. The crystalline being had lived for over 300 years and had never seen anything like the systematic destruction that human forces were inflicting on established galactic order. The Nexari homeworld began experiencing something their species had not felt for millennia as human raids disrupted supply lines that brought resources from conquered systems. For the first time in their history, the crystalline beings faced shortages of materials that their civilization needed to function while their military struggled to protect trade routes from human attack. The decisive moment came when Admiral Sullivan gathered the largest human fleet ever assembled for an assault on Nexus Prime, the administrative capital of the Galactic Council. The massive operation involved over 200 human ships, including vessels that had been captured from aliens and converted for human use. The fleet represented everything that humanity could muster for what everyone knew would be the final battle of the war. Captain Alex Chen led the advance force that cleared alien picket ships from the outer system, while Commander Jennifer Blake coordinated fighter strikes against orbital defense platforms that protected the Council's seat of power. The aliens threw everything they had left at the approaching human fleet, but found themselves overwhelmed by tactics that turned their own defensive systems against them. The siege of Nexus Prime lasted 3 weeks as human forces systematically dismantled the planet's defenses while Council leaders huddled in underground bunkers trying to coordinate a response that never came. The crystalline towers that had stood as symbols of alien dominance for centuries fell one by one under human bombardment that combined captured alien weapons with devastating human innovations. When human marines finally breached the Council chambers themselves, they found Speaker Veltar and the remaining alien leaders waiting with white flags of surrender. The beings who had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years were finally ready to beg for the peace that humanity had never wanted, but would now dictate on their own terms. Speaker Veltar stood in the detention facility that had once been his own Council chambers, staring through reinforced glass at the human delegation that would decide the fate of galactic civilization. The crystalline being who had ruled over countless worlds for centuries now found himself powerless and desperate as he prepared to make the most important plea of his long life. His fellow council members sat behind him equally defeated and terrified of what humanity might demand in return for peace. President Claire Johnson arrived at Nexus, prime aboard the massive command ship UHS Vengeance, which had been built using the finest human and captured alien technology available. She was now in her second term as leader of United Earth, and the years of war had changed her from a hopeful diplomat into a hardened leader who understood that mercy shown to tyrants was cruelty to their victims. Admiral Kate Sullivan accompanied the president along with General Frank Weber and Secretary of State Elizabeth Kim. The human delegation entered the former council chambers with the confidence of victors who had earned their position through blood and sacrifice rather than inherited authority. They took seats at the same table where the council had once planned humanity's containment and possible extinction. The peace negotiations began with Speaker Veltar attempting to salvage what remained of the galactic order that his species had dominated for over 1,000 years. He offered humanity everything he believed they could possibly want, including vast territories rich in resources, advanced alien technology, and recognition as an equal member of the galactic community. The council was prepared to share power if it meant they could retain some measure of their former authority. President Johnson listened to the alien proposals with cold patience, while her advisors took notes on every word spoken by the desperate council representatives. The humans had come to these negotiations with clear objectives that had been developed during months of planning while the alien fleet burned in orbit above their conquered capital world. When Speaker Veltar finished his opening presentation, President Johnson stood and delivered humanity's response with the same steel in her voice that had defied the original alien ultimatum years earlier. Her words were simple and direct, leaving no room for misinterpretation about what humanity expected from the defeated council members. The human demands were non-negotiable and would fundamentally reshape galactic civilization according to human principles rather than alien traditions. First, the Galactic Council would be completely dissolved, and its member species would become independent nations responsible for governing their own worlds without interference from any central authority. Second, all oppressed species that had been enslaved or relocated by the Council would be granted immediate freedom and assistance in rebuilding their civilizations. Third, and most importantly, humanity would establish itself as the dominant military power in the galaxy, with permanent bases throughout former Council territory to ensure that no alien species ever again attempted to recreate the tyrannical system that had just been destroyed. Human forces would patrol space lanes and protect trade routes while maintaining the peace through strength rather than oppression. Speaker Veltar protested that these terms would destroy galactic civilization as it had existed for millennia, but President Johnson's response became one of the most quoted statements in human history. She told the alien leader that his civilization had been built on subjugation and slavery, while humanity would create something better, based on freedom and voluntary cooperation between species. When the Council representatives argued that they could not possibly agree to such harsh terms, President Johnson reminded them that they were not negotiating from a position of strength. Their fleets had been destroyed, their worlds were occupied, and their people were looking to them for leadership that could save what remained of their civilization. The choice was simple: acceptance of human terms or complete destruction of everything they had ever built. The formal surrender ceremony took place in the Great Assembly Hall, where the Council had once ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. Representatives from dozens of liberated species attended the event as witnesses to the end of alien tyranny and the beginning of a new galactic order, based on human principles of freedom and self-determination. Admiral Sullivan oversaw the systematic dismantling of Council military infrastructure, while human administrators like Governor Patricia Moore began establishing new governmental systems on liberated worlds. The transition was carefully managed to prevent chaos while ensuring that former Council species understood their new position in the galactic hierarchy that humanity now controlled. Captain Andrew Hall led deep space exploration missions that pushed human influence into previously unknown regions of the galaxy, where other alien civilizations might pose future threats to the new order. His scouts carried the message that humanity was now the dominant power in known space, and that any species considering aggression against human interests should learn from the Council's mistake. The final scene of humanity's galactic conquest took place on a former council world where human educators, like Carol Davis, worked to rebuild civilization according to human values. An alien child looked up at human ships in the sky and asked her teacher what the vessels represented for the future of their world. Carol explained that the ships were symbols of hope, rather than conquest, because they carried protectors who would ensure that never again would any species be enslaved or oppressed by those who claimed superior authority. The galaxy had learned that when humanity said never again, they meant it with absolute determination and unlimited commitment. The former council species gradually adapted to their new reality under human oversight, while liberated worlds began flourishing for the first time in centuries. Trade resumed under human protection, and exploration expanded into regions that had been forbidden under the old galactic order. Science and culture began developing freely without the restrictions that had limited progress under alien rule. Years passed, and the galaxy settled into a new pattern of civilization where strength protected freedom rather than enforcing submission. Human bases throughout known space served as reminders that tyranny would never again be tolerated, while human ships patrolled the darkness between stars, ensuring that the peace was maintained through vigilance rather than oppression. The Galactic Council had begged for peace in their final desperate hours, but humanity had refused to listen to pleas from those who had shown no mercy to their own victims. Instead, humans had created something better than peace through negotiation with tyrants. They had achieved peace through victory over those who would have enslaved entire civilizations, and had built a galaxy where freedom was protected by those strong enough to defend it against any who would threaten it.